I want to talk about the very specific things that I have found that I love in books. And I have examples for just about all of them. This is not a book review video, so I'm not going to be talking about the plots of these books or my reactions to them. And just because the books that I'm going to show have the characteristic that I love, doesn't mean that this is a favorite book, doesn't mean I hate it, it just means that it has this specific thing. Even though I'm not going into the plots of these books for this video, I might have other videos where I do, so I will link those for you. My all-time absolute favorite thing about books, though, is meeting other book lovers like you. So please be sure you are subscribed to this channel, Jack and the Book Stack. And comment down below, out of this list of 20 things, how many do we have in common? Where do you agree and where do you disagree? Is there something on this list that you disagree with and you can't stand? I really want to know because we all have very unique taste. Let's get going. A lot of these things I get really excited and passionate about, so I'm going to try really hard to list these without rambling, but we'll see how that goes for me. I'm a chatty bookworm. Starting out with the first one on the list, and these are in no way ranked in order of favorites because that's not possible, but one thing that I adore in books, I just eat it up, is an isolated setting, closed circle mystery. Examples for this come from the Queen herself, Agatha Christie, for And Then There Were None and Death on the Nile. Fantastic examples of this. Next, I love books that feature book lovers or authors. So for an example of a book featuring an author, Stephen King loves to do this, and Misery is the perfect example of a book about a writer. Then for the other feature, a book about book lovers, Love and Other Words is a great example of characters that really appreciate reading. It's their favorite hobby, and this couple just loves language and words, so it's a fantastic example. For my third favorite thing, I love when there's a book within a book. And I just experienced this when I listened to the audiobook for Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was awesome because it was a horror book within a horror book, and that was awesome. I loved this. Number 4 on my list might actually be a contender for my favorite all-time thing in books, but I could probably say that about more than half of this list. But I love it. It hits my soul when there is found family. And The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo has such a beautiful found family in it. I just get so attached to them, and I love that emotional connection I have for found family. Number 5 on my list, I love when the book features a dog and there's a strong bond with that pet. Under the Whispering Door is a fantastic, very wholesome example of this. A setting that I absolutely adore in books, I cannot get enough of it, is when the book takes place at an old estate or manor. Kind of very Knives Out vibes if you've seen that movie. An example of a more recent release that's super popular is the Inheritance games. Honestly, this estate or manor was a little bit over the top where I didn't really believe it, but it's an example that I think a lot of folks have read, so I wanted to mention it. I think Rebecca is the kind of vibe I'm going for because it's an amazing, amazing estate. I actually love the book a lot more than the movie because my image of the estate of Manderley, I think it's called, was so much more grand in my head than any movie could ever make it. I love, love, love this estate. I love that particular manor estate setting because a great description can paint an image in my head. And kind of along similar lines, I love when books have fantastic descriptions of foods and tastes. I think this paints a same picture in my head, but like in a different way because it's flavors, duh. But a great example of this book is Crying in H Mart. This book did a great job describing flavors and textures and foods that I never would have heard of because it's outside of my culture and what I'm familiar with. And so this is what I mean. I love descriptions of this food. Number 8 on my list, I love when a book has foreshadowing. And Stephen King is awesome with this. And I think I really like that for horror because it builds the anticipation for me. I think it has a lot of that. He'll say a couple times, and that was the last time they would ever be together again. Number 9 on my list. I love when a book features male characters being feminists. And there's a lot of examples of this, especially more recent releases. I'm seeing a lot more of this, and I love it. One example is in the Off Campus series by Elle Kennedy. One of the characters touches on it, and I can't remember out of the 5-book series which book says it, but one of the characters, who is a man whore, is talking about a female and how she has a reputation of sleeping around. And he has this inner dialogue where he says that he will never call her a slut because she's not doing anything differently than what he's doing. So why is it different for women? She's just empowered, she's comfortable in her own skin. And I really love that description. I loved him kind of calling out how it's different for men and women. I also read the book Hooked, and there was an interesting quote in here from our villain Hook when he's talking to his love, and I'll go ahead and paste it here on the screen because I can't remember it off the top of my head and I forgot to look it up before this video. But I really like this tone of not having to be saved. On one hand, I really like a main character that's taking care of his woman, but it's also great when he can step back and let her be in power herself. Maybe still going along with the feminist theme, I love when there's an underestimated female character in a book and she just proves everyone wrong with her intelligence. A great example of this is Electric Idol by Katie Roberts. This book is known for its steam and smut, but what stood out to me was that there was a main female character that everyone thought was pretty ditzy and only cared about her reputation, and she didn't work hard at anything, and she really proves them wrong with how intelligent she is. Number 11, something that I am very envious of in real life are people that can speak multiple languages or polyglots. That's why I myself am dabbling in Spanish and French, because I just really envy that. I think that's so cool that people can communicate with other cultures and people across the world. So when I see a book that has phrases in another language, of course I eat it all up. The Spanish Love Deception definitely has different Spanish phrases sprinkled throughout the book, which I thought was really cool. And the thriller The Paris Apartment has some French phrases sprinkled throughout. And even though my pronunciation is not as far along with French as it is with Spanish, seeing it in a book, of course I'm fluent in my head. So it's really cool, it adds a lot of flavor, and it's something I really enjoy to see. Number 12, I cannot get enough of revenge plots. And the classic, the OG, of which everything is compared to, is The Count of Monte Cristo. This is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I know I said I wasn't going to rank these books or anything, but it is what it is. I love this book because I love an intelligent revenge plot. Next up, I love me a good bad boy with a heart of gold aspect, particularly when it's like a misunderstood leader where he really cares about his people. He doesn't care about his reputation. He just cares about being a good leader and doing what is best for his people. So 2 examples I thought of for this was Neon Gods and of Court of Mist and Fury. Enough said, right? You know what I'm talking about with these 2. Number 14, something I love to see, and it's usually in the thriller genre, is a moral serial killer. And that kind of goes with the vengeance, I think, sometimes, but the examples I have are Billy Summers and They Never Learn. Both have great examples of someone who's either an assassin or a serial killer, and they have morals, they have standards. They're not going to just kill for the sake of killing. There's a reason behind it. And I love reading books like that. If you know of other moral serial killers or assassins, please comment down below because I want it. I want all of them. Moving right along to number 15 on the list. I love when a book has representation for some kind of condition or something that I wouldn't have exposure to otherwise. And the absolute perfect example of this is The Kiss Quotient. This book features a main character with autism, and I think what's very special about this representation is that our character is not weak. she is very empowered, she's very smart. It's not something that's wrong with her, it's just described as how she sees the world differently. And having this insight into a condition that I never would have understood otherwise is something very magic. And I think when a book can give you that exposure to another world and a better understanding of other people, I think that's what makes reading powerful. So the KISS quotient is a great example of representation. Number 16, I love in books when there's an exploration of grief. And there are so many books where that's the central theme of the novel. And I could have picked a lot of examples for this, but I picked 9 Perfect Strangers because it's not the main storyline here. This features several different points of view, and there's one point of view from a family who just lost their son, or the girl's brother, to suicide. And that's not a spoiler. It's said kind of in the beginning, but what's so amazing is the insight into how they're dealing with it and how each of the 3 family members feel differently about it. There's, the grief in missing someone, there's the guilt, there's the regret of things not said, not done. And that's why I love representation of grief and exploration of grief and all the different ways authors portray it. 9 Perfect Strangers is a fantastic, fantastic example of that. Going down a completely different path for number 17, I love me a good haunted house. And there is none better than in The Shining at the Overlook Hotel. What is your favorite haunted house? Because I'm looking for more. I was definitely scrolling through Kindle Unlimited to see all the haunted house stories, and there were a ton. So I need to investigate more to see which ones are good. But what is your favorite haunted house story? For me, The Shining, top tier. It's what everything else is compared to. Number 18, I love the comedic relief that comes with banter. And the book that is top of mind that made me laugh out loud because it was so funny was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This college romance has 2 characters that start out not liking each other, but then they become friends and they stay that way a little bit before they turn romantic. And so their banter is just top-notch, hilarious. I really adored it. For number 19, one of my favorite things in books is the concept of fate or alternate realities. And a great example of this is The Midnight Library, where our main character is seeing all the different paths her life could have taken. I think that is really cool, and I think about it all the time in my own life. If you just made one little choice differently, how would your life have played out differently? Another great example of this different paths thing is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this has to be one of my favorite examples of this. It's one decision that our character could have made differently, and then there's alternating chapters with how her life would have played out. And this is something, I'm not kidding, I think about this all the time. If I just would have done one little thing differently, the different ways your life could have branched off. I think it's so thought-provoking, and that's why I love fate and what's meant to be will be. Number 20, if you can believe it, we're finally there, and I don't think I've rambled too much. I'll see when I'm watching this footage back, but I am who I am. Last on my list, I love when there is a workplace setting, if even for a moment, or conversations about relationships with coworkers. I think this is important because most of us spend the majority of our time at work, and I spend more time with my coworkers than some of my friends and loved ones. So I think it just makes sense that they talk about it in books. And when I read Shipped, this takes place, in a tropical Galapagos setting for a lot of it, but there's a lot of conversations with relationships with coworkers, and there is an office setting and office dynamics. So I really appreciate it because it's real life. It's very realistic. I can relate to it, so I like to see it. Okay, that's my 20. How many did you and I have in common? And which ones did you disagree with? I'm really dying to know. And like I said, I'd love more examples with some of these things that you know of in other books because I'm always looking for more. I'm always on the hunt for more books to adore. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.